Professor Li Cheng, what a pleasure to see you.
Same here.
As we all know, China is trying to gear up its economy. Of course, consumption, domestic consumption, extremely important. Now, to your understanding, what is the role of the middle class, or shall I say, middle income groups?
A country's consumption really rely on the middle income group. These are the drivers, these are the takers for major changes in the economic consumption. Yes, of course, China's consumption slowed down largely because of the real estate market. And because real estate development usually will drive a lot of sectors for development. But on the other hand, I think there's a serious concern whether it be population change or property bubble. I think government is right to be careful about the potential problem in the oversupply in the real estate. The real estate price is already high, so that certainly hit the middle class. The confidence of middle class probably largely due to that factor. Now, stock market is also another issue. But I think that the stock market, in my view, probably will come back. But on the other hand, in terms of the domestic tourism, China is doing very, very dynamic. So in the Spring Festival, we already know there's about 300 million people, travel around, within China. So this is tremendous potential. Although people do not want to spend much money to buy, more expensive products. The luxury goods sale decline yet, and people still wanted to have domestic tourism. Usually go to the second, third tier city, even small township and the villages. So that tourism is a potential new way of consumption. People wanted to, you see the pattern of change. But eventually, I think that if confidence come back, if real estate development stabilize, and the stock market stabilize, I think that China will be a very, very competitive case.
In your latest book, Middle Class Shanghai, you argue that the Chinese middle class, or in the sense, middle income groups in China, have been willing to spend their money on education, consumption of cultural products, on tourism, and the list goes on. So are there commonalities among them, do you see, in terms of why do they make the decision and how do they make the decision?
Well, that's just basically, I think that when I use the middle income group or middle class, actually that concept refers to some common values and common behaviors. This is actually global. For Chinese, partly because of cultural reason and partly because of a single child family. Usually, parents put a lot of emphasis on their children's education. China did not have this kind of group until 1980s and now become very, very sizable. So that actually certainly contribute the China's economic development, and to a certain extent contribute to the global economic growth. Now, it's important to say when China's middle class emerged, they greatly benefit from the openness of the outside world, so benefited from globalization. So at that time, American middle class or European middle class or Japanese middle class are best allies for China because they provide the market, provide the investment opportunity, provide the kind of all the kind of middle class exchanges.
Those that are now become China's middle class, a lot of them are in their 30s, early 40s. These are the generation that have already seen China's rise over the past 2 decades to 3. And they, at a very young age, have already seen a very different world compared to their parents. So the rise of middle class, including in the consumption of overseas education, how is that changing the overall landscape and mindset of China's middle income groups?
The size of this group and also their exposure to international scene and their global thinking, forward-looking thinking, makes them more confident. This is related with China's rise. You look at China's, the fascinating development over the reform area. This is a story from a low-income group country to middle income group. Now China is moving towards people call, or IMF, World Bank call, the development group. You look at the third platinum platform, also really talk about the great success when China from the low end of the competition to middle end of the competition. Now China wants to do the technological innovation. So their foreign exchanges, they're exposed to the outside world, and their capacity to pursue the new life, and also their confidence about the knowledge they develop, their knowledge particularly about around the world, not just isolated, not just within China. They also have a confidence about China's own modernization, because China needs to be part of the world, because China benefit, particularly China's middle class, benefit from economic globalization. So this put them in a very, very important position. Now, at the moment, of course, that China confronts challenges like other middle class country, like the Western middle class country, like China's neighboring countries. This is a common challenge. This is related with the anti-globalization trend. I hope that only China's experience, the fact that benefit from the globalization, and also confidence about the Chinese culture development. It's not so much about the one culture replace the other, but the cultural dialogue between China and the outside world, whether it be global South or whether it be the West. So this kind of development, so make the Chinese country or Chinese middle class is more well positioned at the time of the challenges. And of course, at that moment, not only challenges on the global economy, but also some of the so-called ideological polarization. I hope that people should be confident the world will face some common challenges with climate change or terrorism, nuclear proliferation, and or kind of a pandemic we just experienced. So that's kind of global thinking. I think it's extremely important. Middle class, I think by nature, should be involved with the more global perspective rather than narrow-minded nationalism. So this is, I hope, with the new generation, younger generation of the middle class.
Professor Li, in some of the latest public speeches, you argued to the U.S. policymakers about the fact that China is not, as they describe it, an iron board. In other words, there are so many different diversities and varieties of social groups in China. And a failure to recognize that, especially to recognize the importance and significance of China's middle income groups or middle class, would be a failure for the policymakers to really understand the importance of China today, and also to work with China for the benefits of both. Tell us more about your thoughts, especially right now when the U.S. is going through the presidential election season.
Well, I'm a little bit concerned about China's study in the United States. It's used to be very, very strong because in terms of theoretical thinking, in terms of disciplinary development. But in recent couple of decades, we do see some problem. Sometimes there's overemphasis on economic modeling and less emphasis on history, on culture. That trend particularly evident in American, PhD programs in social sciences become too quantitative. This is often, I said, like economics become mathematics. Political science become statistics. This is overall, it's not serve American interest. But more recently, partly because of COVID, partly because of McCarthyism, partly because political correctness, and that even State Department still rank China as a dangerous place to study. And also that when data is really astonishing, according to Economist, a British magazine, saying that only 28,000 American students studying Chinese. But as you know, that there's so many Chinese studying English, from the levels of elementary and middle school, particularly university, it's a requirement. So that's a kind of things really prevent Americans have a better understanding. So for me, since I arrived in Hong Kong and start to teach in Hong Kong, one day in the morning I went to Shenzhen for a conference, then return to Hong Kong for a meeting, then fly to Beijing or Shanghai. This kind of, accessibility and make me to realize China is such a pluralistic society, and people's view are quite different, cross generation, cross different interest group, across different cities. So give me a more diversified understanding about the complexity of China. And that's actually, certainly for me, it's a really great benefit, because as a student of China, we do need to be exposed to latest development, people's mindset, change of mindset, what's their concern about, what's their worry about, including so-called middle class anxious. It's quite important. People taught me a lot. So this is all very, very important. But I'm just worried when some policymakers or so-called China experts look at China, become too rigid, too ideological, and too stagnant. This is the things that U.S. should or Western country should avoid. Sometimes I feel that when the people talk about China, the China actually did not exist or does not exist in my observation. So some of the rumors are completely out of touch, completely reflect the lack of knowledge or understanding about the Chinese politics, Chinese society. So certainly that view very, very strongly in my past year experience in China. So how to avoid too much obsessed with ideological kind of perspective without a look at the China is also facing some challenges, but at the same time, very, very dynamic. So the argument is that China past the peak is also ridiculous in my view. I think, yes, China's economy is slowed down, but I think I do not see that past the peak. Look at the new generation, look at the forward-looking in terms of new energy, alternative energy, digital economy. No country more emphasis on innovation. To a certain extent, Chinese government officials usually have experience in local administration, largely on economy.
Professor Li Cheng, thank you so much for your input.